Ned Stark stood at the foot of Robert Baratheon's bed, his heart a heavy stone in his chest. Robert's breathing was ragged, and each exhale seemed weaker than the last. Candlelight flickered across the king's sweat-laden brow, revealing the pallid complexion of a man who had lost far too much blood. Maester Pycelle hovered near the bed, a mixture of dread and learned detachment marking his features, as if he had watched many a noble draw his final breath. 2 attendants, members of the king's own household guard, stood by with grim expressions, fully aware that the last moments of Robert Baratheon's life were upon them. Cersei Lannister lingered near the wall, eyes narrowed, her lips set in a tight line. She did not sob or gasp, only watched the dying king with an intent expression. Ned thought he saw a flicker of something like satisfaction behind her composure, but perhaps it was only his mistrust coloring his perception. The Lannisters had played their games for so long that he scarcely believed anything they did could be honest. Littlefinger remained on the outskirts of the room, silent, watchful, as if measuring the precise weight of each second in gold. Varys stood in the shadow of a tall candelabra, face unreadable, his soft hands folded in front of him. Ned took a breath, trying to gather his courage. He had intended to show Robert the paper bearing the king's seal, his last testament, the one naming Ned as protector of the realm should something happen. But Robert had grown delirious and hardly recognized his old friend when they'd spoken but an hour ago. Instead, in a lucid instant, Robert had groaned for him to take the throne, only until my boys of age. A final command that had rung hollow in the air, weighed down by secrets Ned had discovered about Joffrey's parentage. Nevertheless, Robert's broken words of trust, of friendship, had been the last vestige of the once boisterous king's will. Now, with Robert on the verge of death, a hush enveloped the room. The king's eyes fluttered open, just barely, revealing a milky film. His lips parted, and he rasped out, "Ned, gods, help me, protect them." Whether he spoke of his supposed children or the realm, Ned could only guess. With surprising strength, Robert seized Ned's tunic and pulled him closer. The king's eyes sharpened for the briefest of moments. "You're the only man I trust. Do it for me." Then the breath escaped his lips, and the grip slackened until Robert's arm dropped lifeless to his side. In that instance, King Robert Baratheon, the usurper who had toppled the Mad King and brought a new dynasty to the Seven Kingdoms, lay dead. A hush deeper than any Ned had ever known descended on them. For a moment, he could almost sense the realm itself drawing in a sharp breath. This was a transition that would shake the foundations of the Iron Throne. After all, Robert's demise had not been the will of time alone. He had been mortally wounded in a hunt under suspicious circumstances, or at least the events around the boar's fierce charge raised many questions. Too many questions, especially regarding who stood to gain. Cersei stepped forward at once, regal in her composure. Her eyes glistened, though no tears fell. "The king is dead," she intoned flatly. Her gaze flicked to Ned, then to the white-cloaked Kingsguard who had gathered at the door. "Secure his body. Summon the council. We must prepare for the rightful succession." The way she glanced around the room, as if to gauge each person's intent, told Ned that she was already laying the foundation of her next move. Joffrey would inherit, she would see to it, unless someone dared challenge the boy's claim. Ned steeled himself. He looked down at the parchment sealed with the king's own signet, the one naming him regent and protector. Robert had not known that Joffrey was not, in fact, his true-born son. That piece of knowledge weighed heavily on Ned's conscience. But Robert's last words had been clear, even if misinformed, even if overshadowed by the tremendous secret. Someone had to preserve the kingdom, or it would fall prey to chaos and war. Ned had promised Robert he would protect the realm, and that would be his guiding star. For a heartbeat, he almost slid the parchment away, uncertain. He could press the truth of Joffrey's parentage and name Stannis Baratheon as heir, or he could follow Robert's direct command and act as regent to guide whomever the realm considered the rightful heir. But the sorrow in Robert's final words still echoed in his mind. "You're the only man I trust." In that moment, Ned knew he could not allow the realm to break into pieces over the question of the heir. He would do what he perceived as Robert's will, but it would be under his own terms. He would claim the regency, and then, step by step, unravel the lies and ensure that the rightful Baratheon heir sat the throne. With a trembling exhale, Ned beckoned to the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Ser Barristan Selmy, silver-haired and stoic, approached, his white cloak swishing along the floor. The old knight's eyes, too, were filled with grief and a hint of confusion. Ser Barristan, Ned said quietly, we must convene the council. The king is dead, and I carry his final words. He held up the sealed parchment. He named me regent in the event of his passing. A murmur of surprise spread through the chamber, even among the guards. Littlefinger's mouth curved into a faint smile, though his eyes conveyed curiosity and calculation. Cersei's lips parted, but she mastered herself quickly. If Robert named you protector, she said with careful emphasis on the word, I trust, Lord Stark, that you intend to serve faithfully until my son ascends the throne. Ned nodded, hearing the unspoken threat behind her words. I shall serve the realm, he answered. Then he glanced around. Clear the room save for the maester, the Kingsguard, and the small council members. King Robert deserves the dignity of a peaceful farewell. Once we have concluded the matter of the succession, we shall give him all the honor he was due in life. Cersei said nothing, but her green eyes flashed. At her subtle nod, the Lannister guardsmen followed the attendants out, leaving the remaining witnesses in a nervous cluster around the bed. A swirl of tension thickened in the air. Though Robert's body lay still upon the bed, already the Game of Thrones was being played, each person weighing possible outcomes, alliances, and betrayals. Ned felt his stomach twist in distaste. He inhaled, steeling himself for what came next. By the king's last command, he said, lifting the parchment. He named me protector of the realm until his heir shall come of age. It is my intention to follow that command. He glanced at the assembled faces, seeing the mix of cunning, relief, and dread. We must ensure that chaos does not reign in King's Landing. For the good of the realm, I will claim the regency. Littlefinger's breath sounded softly in the chamber, accompanied by the faint rustle of his finely tailored garments. A wise choice, my lord, he said, stepping forward. No doubt the king's last will must be carried out precisely as stated. I trust the seal is Robert's. Ned eyed him, unsettled by the man's pliant tone. It is, he said firmly, witnessed by me on his deathbed. He paused, allowing the gravity of that statement to settle. I will present the letter at the meeting of the small council. Cersei folded her arms. Of course, she said. My lord husband's wishes should be honored. There was that half-sneer in her voice, an edge that signaled she had not yet played her hand. Ned realized that claiming the regency would mean a collision course with Cersei. She would not sit by and watch her power diminished. But Ned meant to keep the vow he had made to Robert, so he would not shirk from whatever came next. Slowly, he nodded to each of them in turn. We gather in the throne room at once. The small cluster of onlookers departed, leaving Robert's body in the care of Maester Pycelle, who went about the solemn task of preparing the king's remains. Ned cast one last glance at Robert. Though the king had grown stout and less disciplined over the years, for Ned, there would always be that memory of the tall, broad-shouldered warrior who had fought side by side with him during the rebellion. His warhammer crushing the Targaryen line on the trident, his laughter booming across the battlements after a victory, his unstoppable determination to place himself on the Iron Throne. Now that man lay still, his spirit gone. Ned felt a twinge of sorrow, mingled with a whisper of foreboding. The war for the throne had begun anew, only this time the enemy lay within these halls, wearing the masks of courtiers and aristocrats. Soon after, in the torchlit corridors of the Red Keep, Ned walked with slow, purposeful strides to the throne room. He would have expected to see more of the city watch, but they, too, had retreated to a more discreet presence, perhaps anticipating the upheaval. Ahead, he glimpsed Sansa and Arya accompanied by Septa Mordane. They had been summoned to remain in the keep while matters of state unfolded, presumably for their safety. Sansa's eyes, full of uncertain tears, locked on her father. She looked frightened. Arya, though anxious, wore an edge of excitement, as though she sensed something monumental in the air. Ned felt a pang of guilt. He had wanted to send them home to Winterfell, away from the intrigues of King's Landing. But it was too late now. When he reached his daughters, he took each of them by the hand. "You must go to your chambers," he told them softly, ignoring the trembling of Sansa's lower lip. "Keep the door barred. Do not open it except for me or your mother. Do you understand?" Sansa glanced at Arya, then nodded. "Yes, father." Her voice was small. Arya studied him with her keen gray eyes. "What's going to happen?" she asked, her voice edged with defiance. Ned paused. He wanted to give them reassurance, to tell them everything would be well. Instead, he said, "Whatever happens, remember you are Starks of Winterfell. Be brave, as your mother taught you." Then he ushered them away, whispering further instructions to Septa Mordain that they should not stray from their rooms until called. He left them behind, accompanied by 2 loyal Stark guards. His path led to the towering doors that opened into the cavernous throne room, its vaulted ceilings and massive pillars carved with the images of dragons. The Iron Throne itself loomed at the far end of the hall, a jagged mass of swords fused by dragonfire, both awe-inspiring and foreboding. Around it stood the members of the small council, along with key lords and the Kingsguard in their white cloaks. Joffrey was not there yet, nor was Tommen or Myrcella. Possibly, the Queen had kept them behind to strategize. As Ned passed between the columns, he felt all eyes fix upon him. Some faces conveyed relief, others suspicion or masked hostility. Littlefinger gave him a courteous nod, while Varys merely inclined his head, his expression one of gentle curiosity. Lord Renly was there too, cheeks pale, for this was his brother's throne. In any other circumstance, Ned would have expected Renly to protest or to champion his claim before the matter of the heirs came forth. But for now, Renly said nothing, only shifted on his feet. Ser Barristan Selmy announced loudly, "Lord Eddard Stark, by the king's own word." The chamber grew silent. The Lord Commander shot Ned a solemn look, then stepped aside. Ned advanced to the foot of the Iron Throne, the letter with Robert's seal still in his hand. He began, his voice echoing through the high-ceilinged hall. "King Robert has passed from this world. On his deathbed, he commanded me to serve as protector of the realm and regent until his heir come of age." He paused, letting the weight of his words spread through the assembly. "I stand here to honor that final wish." With a careful gesture, he displayed the parchment. It bears his seal and royal signature. In the hush that followed, Cersei Lannister entered, flanked by 4 gold-cloaked guards of the City Watch. Ser Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer, walked on her left, helm beneath one arm, golden hair shining like metal. Cersei's chin lifted imperiously. "I bring my son," she declared, and Joffrey strode in, trying to look solemn but succeeding more in appearing excited and impatient. Tommen and Myrcella were nowhere to be seen. Joffrey halted near the Iron Throne, glancing at Ned with undisguised disdain. "Is it true?" he demanded in a sharp tone. "Is my father gone?" His voice, so bold in the courtyard when tormenting others, cracked slightly. Ned bowed his head in a gesture of respect for the boy's grief. "Yes, your grace. King Robert has departed this life." Some flicker of genuine shock crossed the boy's features. Then he seemed to harden. "Then I am king now." He attempted to ascend the steps to the Iron Throne, but Cersei subtly placed her hand on his shoulder, guiding him back. "We will see you crowned," she said. "But first, the matter of the regency must be settled, in accordance with your father's last commands." The council members gathered closer, forming a half-circle. Pycelle, shaky and old, tottered forward. "Lord Stark," he began, his voice trembling with age and something akin to nervousness. "If our late king indeed named you protector, it is customary for the Queen Regent to assume that role in the name of her son. Have you considered?" Ned held up the parchment. "I bring the king's own words, Maester. You may break the seal and read it." He extended the letter. Pycelle coughed, adjusted his glasses, and carefully pried open the seal, the crack of wax echoing in the silence. Then he squinted at the parchment, his lips moving as he scanned each line. When finished, he nodded, though his expression was carefully blank. It states quite clearly that Lord Eddard Stark is named Protector of the Realm until such time as the rightful heir reaches his majority, Pycelle said. Signed by King Robert, sealed this very day. A ripple of murmurs moved through the hall. Renly shifted again, mouth twitching as though he wished to speak but restrained himself. Stannis Baratheon was not present. He had departed the capital days before, and Ned half expected him to claim the throne if he learned that Joffrey was not Robert's true-born son. That confrontation might come soon, perhaps, but for now, the immediate threat lay in this hall. Cersei exhaled as though disappointed. "So it must be," she said, with an almost theatrical resignation. "Lord Stark, I will trust you to guide my son until the day he can rule on his own." Joffrey broke in, voice high and full of indignation. "But I am king. I do not need a protector telling me what to do." His youthful pride flared. "I want to be crowned immediately, and I will sit the throne at once. If Father's will was to have Lord Stark watch over me, so be it, but we must waste no time." Ned felt the tension mounting. The boy's arrogance reminded him of his suspicion. Joffrey was no Baratheon, yet he remembered his promise to Robert, and so he forced calm into his words. "In due time, Your Grace, there are matters of state, arrangements for your father's funeral, and we must ensure the peace of the realm. I shall serve you faithfully, for your father's sake." Joffrey stared at him with a mixture of pride and challenge, as though testing Ned's mettle. "See that you do," he said at last, turning his gaze to the Iron Throne. "I'll be a greater king than my father ever was." A hush lingered at that bold remark. Ned wondered if the boy had any inkling of the resentment Robert had harbored for his own burdens. But that was a reflection for another time. For now, Ned faced the assembly. "We have no reason to delay," he said. "The king's funeral arrangements shall proceed, and as protector, I shall handle the day-to-day governance of the realm, in consultation with the small council." Littlefinger took a step forward. "A wise decision, my lord. I trust you will want to secure the city watch as well. Their loyalty is crucial in these uncertain days." A memory stirred in Ned's mind, the recollection of how Littlefinger had once promised him support and betrayed him. Yet now everything had changed. Ned had the king's own words naming him regent, and that might shift the balance of power. He leveled a measured look at Littlefinger. "Yes," he said. "I will meet with Lord Baelish to arrange for the city watch. I expect no disturbances, but we should be prepared." Littlefinger gave a courteous bow. Varys, too, inclined his head in agreement. "Chaos is a pit, my lord," the Master of Whisperers said in his soft voice. "We must fill it with order, or else risk losing all we have built." Ned turned to Barristan Selmy. "Ser Barristan, I trust the Kingsguard remain loyal to the throne, whoever sits it. King Robert's last command must be honored." The old knight gave a crisp nod, though sorrow clouded his eyes. "We serve the realm, my lord," Ser Barristan said. "I will see to it that the throne is protected and that no man does violence here." His gaze lingered on Jaime Lannister, who stood calmly beside the queen. The Kingslayer's expression revealed nothing. Ned sensed that, for the moment, an uneasy acceptance had settled over the throne room. He had effectively taken the position of regent. Yet he knew Cersei, Jaime, and likely Joffrey himself would find ways to undermine him. War might still be on the horizon, but at least for the coming hours, bloodshed could be averted. The deeper question loomed. Would Ned publicly challenge Joffrey's claim as soon as he had secured the city, naming Stannis as the rightful heir? Or would he bide his time, hoping to avoid a civil war? He forced a breath. "This session is concluded," he declared, stepping back from the throne's dais. "I will speak with each of you on the matters at hand in the coming days. For now, let us prepare to mourn our king." He glanced at Joffrey, who stood impatiently near the steps. "Your Grace, if you wish to visit your father's body in the September, Preparations will be made shortly. Joffrey nodded curtly. Yes, I will, he said, though it sounded more like a command. But not with you. He gestured for the Kingsguard to accompany him, and with one regal swirl of his crimson and gold cloak, he turned to depart. Cersei followed, though not before bestowing a thin smile on Ned. Jaime Lannister offered Ned a mocking bow, then trailed after his sister. Within moments, the throne room had mostly emptied. Renly lingered near one of the pillars, his face a study in conflicted emotion. "My brother is dead," he murmured to Ned as they stood close. "Stannis is the elder, but Joffrey sits in Robert's place. I want no war, but neither do I want the Lannisters to seize control." Ned regarded the young Baratheon lord. "I know. Your loyalty to Robert was never in doubt, Lord Renly. I would hear what you have to say." He paused, scanning the hall to ensure they were not overheard. "Meet me in my solar tonight. We will talk." Renly inclined his head, grateful. Then he hurried out, no doubt to see if he could gather any influence of his own now that events were in motion. Ned watched him go and felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. The burden of the regency, layered atop his knowledge of the ugly truth behind Joffrey's parentage, bore down on him. He would need every ally he could find. War might be inevitable, but perhaps, if he played his cards carefully, he could minimize the bloodshed. Hiding a sigh, Ned turned, stepping away from the Iron Throne. As he did, he could not help but recall the day he had first laid eyes on that twisted seat of blades, the day Robert had claimed the throne. How far they had come from that moment of glory, how tarnished everything had become. But he had Robert's final wish echoing in his mind. "You're the only man I trust. Do it for me." Yes, Ned would do it. He would do it not to grasp power, but to secure peace and justice for the realm. And in so doing, he would risk every drop of blood in his veins, and perhaps the blood of his family. But he would not waver. He was Eddard Stark of Winterfell, and the word of a Stark was iron. That night, as the torches flickered in the corridors and the hush of morning settled over the Red Keep, Ned met with the small council in a subdued session. Over a long table in a side chamber, far from the prying ears of courtiers, they discussed the immediate matters: funeral rites, logistics of letting the lords of the realm know of Robert's passing, and the preparations for Joffrey's coronation. Ned insisted on postponing the coronation until Robert's body had lain in state for at least a week. Cersei had not yet arrived at the council meeting, apparently preferring to remain with Joffrey in his private chambers. So the rest of them, Pycelle, Littlefinger, Varys, and Ser Barristan, nodded along with no strong objection voiced. Ned tested the waters regarding the issue of Stannis, wondering if any present might mention him. But only Renly brought it up, quietly pointing out that Stannis was rightful heir if one followed strict lines of legitimacy. Varys, however, only shrugged his soft shoulders. "The realm loves not Stannis. He is righteous, yes, but lacks warmth." The people might rally behind the young prince they believed to be Robert's son. Renly scoffed but said nothing more. Ned ended the meeting with an announcement. "We shall speak again tomorrow. I will hold private audiences with each of you regarding administrative matters. And," he added pointedly, "the City Watch must remain neutral in all matters of succession until we have stability." Littlefinger nodded, placing a hand upon his chest in a gesture of feigned loyalty. Ned held his gaze a moment longer than necessary, then stood, signaling that the meeting was done. As the others filed out, Renly tarried a moment, waiting for Ned at the threshold. "You asked me to meet you in your solar tonight," he reminded him. "I will come, unless you have changed your mind?" Ned shook his head. "No, join me in an hour, and let us speak freely there." Renly offered a tight smile, then departed. Ned lingered for a moment, letting the swirl of the day's events settle in his mind. Claiming the regency so openly had averted an immediate coup by Cersei, yet he felt certain she would not let the matter rest. She knew he was not ignorant of her children's parentage. Something would snap soon, like an overdrawn bowstring. When it did, King's Landing might drown in its own blood. He left for his solar, accompanied by 2 Stark guards who had served him faithfully since Winterfell. Along the way, he caught a glimpse of Cersei striding through a corridor with Jaime at her side. Her gaze met his for a heartbeat. He saw something like cold hatred there, and he wondered if she knew the fullness of the threat he posed. The moment passed, and they went their separate ways without a word. Inside the solar, he found the hearth dimly lit. He dismissed his guards, feeling the need for privacy, though the tensions in the castle made him uneasy. Still, if he were to speak openly with Renly, it would be better without an audience. Taking a seat by the small table, he let out a ragged sigh. His mind drifted to Catelyn and the rest of his children. Would they ever again be truly safe in this viper's nest? After a time, a soft knock sounded. Ned rose and unbarred the door. Renly slipped inside, wearing a simple green tunic, his face still etched with the shock of Robert's death. Ned gestured for him to be seated. Before the younger man could speak, Ned poured them each a cup of wine. "We are alone," Ned said, handing Renly the cup. "Tell me your thoughts." Renly took a swallow, his hand trembling slightly. "I hardly know what to think, Lord Stark. My brother is gone, and now Joffrey sits poised to be crowned. You know as well as I do that Joffrey may not be Robert's true son." His voice was hushed, as though the very walls might betray him. Ned nodded, feeling the weight of the secret pressing upon him. "I have reason to believe Joffrey is Jaime Lannister's child." Renly set down his cup. "As do I. Robert confided in me once that he never bedded Cersei enough to be certain of siring so many children. He was drunk at the time, and I doubt he even remembered telling me. But I remember." He sighed. "The question is, what do we do now? If it comes out that Joffrey is no true Baratheon, the realm will be thrown into chaos." Ned spoke carefully. "Robert named me protector, and he died never knowing the truth of Joffrey's parentage. My first instinct is to do what is right and place the crown on the rightful heir's head." Renly's eyes sharpened. "You mean Stannis. If you name him king, he will accept the throne, though I doubt he will be merciful to those who spurn him. Stannis does not forget slights, and he will see a rebellion behind every door if the Lannisters resist him." Ned pursed his lips. "That is my fear. The realm is already battered by poor harvests in some areas, unrest in others. Another civil war could leave thousands dead. Joffrey is not the rightful heir, but he might be a figure the people accept, at least until the truth becomes commonly known. If he's crowned, though, the Lannisters remain in power." He leaned back, eyebrows drawn together. "I swore to Robert the First would protect the realm. And in my eyes, that means ensuring the rightful heir, not a bastard of incest, rules. But must we do it at once, or can we proceed cautiously?" Renly's tone grew urgent. "Cautiously, yes, but not too slowly. The Lannisters will move quickly to consolidate power. Soon, they may remove you from your position by force or cunning. You must be prepared, Ned. The gold cloaks, the city watch. Do we know where their true loyalties lie?" Ned sighed. "Littlefinger assures me they can be bought, but trusting him is perilous. I will speak to Commander Janos Slint myself." He paused, recalling the man's pinched face and unblinking eyes. "But I do not fully trust him either." Renly rose from his chair and paced. "If you decide to name Stannis king, I'll stand aside, though I fear he will not value me in his new reign." He turned, his expression fierce. "But if you would consider an alternative—" He paused, gauging Ned's reaction. Ned frowned. "An alternative?" Renly nodded, quiet for a moment. "Stannis is dutiful, yes, but not beloved. Marjorie Tyrell, my betrothed in secret discussions. She would do well as a queen, and I might be a better king than Stannis. At least in the hearts of the people. Perhaps I can rally the Stormlands more quickly. The Tyrells might throw the might of Highgarden behind me." He hesitated. "I know it is not strictly lawful, but if the realm accepts me rather than Stannis, we might avoid a devastating war." Ned's eyes widened slightly. He had not expected Renly to propose such a course so openly. "That would be a usurpation of a different sort," Ned said quietly. Stannis is Robert's eldest surviving brother. By rights, the throne should pass to him if Joffrey is disqualified. Renly gave a frustrated shrug. Rights, yes, but do you see Stannis as a man who will inspire lords and peasants alike? The realm needs stability, not just legal justification. I offer a path that may avoid rivers of blood. Ned set his jaw. I am not one to disregard law so lightly. Robert overthrew a mad king, but Targaryen rule had lost the love of the people. This is different. A pained expression flickered across Renly's face. Then you leave me no choice but to act if Stannis tries to take the throne. I will defend my own claim, and if Joffrey is crowned first, that might push Stannis into open rebellion, and I might be forced to choose sides. The realm would be split thrice over. He exhaled, shaking his head in frustration. I have no desire for war, Ned, but war might be coming regardless. Ned stared at the candle on the table, the flame flickering. So many paths led to blood. You must do what you believe is best, Lord Renly. But my duty is clear to me, even if the path is not. He rose, meeting Renly's gaze. I must gather more information, secure the city, and ensure that the Lannisters do not strike first. I will decide soon enough whether to denounce Joffrey publicly and name Stannis. Renly studied him, then nodded, though disappointment showed in his eyes. I hope you know what you are doing. Robert loved you like a brother. He paused. I wish you luck, Ned. Ned extended a hand, which Renly clasped briefly. Then the younger man turned and quietly slipped out of the solar. The echo of the doors closing lingered in the small chamber. Ned breathed in deeply, considering the weight of what Renly had said. Another rebellion, another turning of the wheel, was perhaps inevitable unless Ned could somehow neutralize the Lannisters and secure a peaceful transition of power. But how did one do that in the face of their ambition? He pressed his fingers to his temples, feeling a headache forming. The hour was late, but sleep would not come easily. He doused the candles, barred the door, and lay upon the bed without undressing fully, his mind drifting across a battlefield of possibilities. Images of Robert's face, twisted in pain, flashed behind his eyelids. You're the only man I trust, echoed in the corridors of his memory. Ned wondered if, in trying to honor Robert's trust, he might tear the Seven Kingdoms apart. Dawn came to King's Landing under a veil of pale sunlight, weak against the haze of the city's grime. The bells of the Great September told a solemn dirge for the departed king, their deep clang resonating through streets packed with curious onlookers. People lined up near the city's gates, anticipating processions, rumors swirling that the king's body would be moved to the September soon. Word spread quickly that Ned Stark had been named regent, and the common folk were uncertain whether to cheer or worry. Some remembered him from the days of Robert's rebellion, yet the Lannisters were a powerful presence in the city, and fear of their retribution weighed heavily. In the Red Keep's council chamber, Ned convened an early meeting. He had requested the presence of Janos Slynt, commander of the City Watch, along with Lord Baelish, Lord Varys, and Ser Barristan Selmy. Cersei had declined to attend, sending a polite message that she would remain with Joffrey during his mourning. Ned suspected she wanted to watch from the shadows, letting him make moves she could later decry. Janos Slynt arrived, broad-faced and shifting on his feet, draped in the black cloak of the Watch's officers. He gave Ned a curt bow, then settled into a seat. Littlefinger was already there, sipping from a cup of sweet wine, and Varys hovered in the corner as if an afterthought. Ser Barristan stood by Ned's side, arms crossed behind his back, a silent pillar of knightly virtue. Ned began, voice level. Commander Slynt, I have summoned you to discuss the disposition of the City Watch. With the king's passing, I want to ensure the peace of King's Landing is maintained above all else. Slynt nodded, adjusting the collar of his cloak. Aye, my lord. The gold cloaks stand ready to do as the Regent commands. We keep the peace in Flea Bottom and along the docks. Rest assured, we'll hold the city secure. Ned watched him carefully. Good. I want your men at key points. The gates, the main thoroughfares, and especially near the Red Keep. Should any trouble arise, you will quell it swiftly. Slint nodded again. Understood, my lord. I'll see to it at once. A brief flicker of relief crossed Ned's features, though he knew that Littlefinger likely had Slint in his pocket. He had to tread cautiously. I also want to ensure, Ned continued, that no undue violence or intimidation occurs. The people mourn their king. They must not fear the crown's officers. Janos bowed his head, giving no sign of protest. Littlefinger smiled that thin, knowing smile of his. It's a pity you did not consult with me sooner, Lord Stark. I might have arranged certain financial considerations to secure the undying loyalty of the City Watch. They can be expensive to maintain, as you might guess. Ned met his gaze with quiet disapproval. Commander Slint is here, and he has pledged loyalty. That should suffice. Funds for the watch can be discussed in due course, Lord Baelish. Littlefinger gave a lazy shrug. As you say, my Lord Regent. Varys ventured a small cough. Perhaps, my lord, you might wish to also consider intelligence among the ranks. The hearts of men can be swayed by coin or promises. If someone else were to pay them more, well, Ned cut him off softly. I will trust Commander Slint to see that no treachery flourishes under his command. If trust is broken, we will deal with it accordingly. He turned to Slint. I pray I have your word on this. The commander offered a stiff bow. You do, my lord. Ned then looked to Ser Barristan. Ser Barristan, as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, you will coordinate with Commander Slint when the king's body is moved to the September. We cannot allow any harm to come to the procession. Barristan inclined his head. Of course, Lord Stark. Ned tapped his knuckles on the table. Then we are concluded here. We meet again this afternoon. Commander Slint, see to your men. The city must remain calm. Slint rose and departed, nodding to Littlefinger as he passed. Varys drifted away, disappearing through a side door as quietly as a cat. Soon only Ned, Littlefinger, and Ser Barristan remained. A silence lingered until Littlefinger cleared his throat. You do realize, my lord, that the Queen might not look kindly upon the gold cloaks taking orders solely from you. She may have her own instructions for them. Ned did not hide his annoyance. I am the Regent, appointed by the late King's word. The City Watch is duty-bound to follow me. If the Queen attempts to circumvent that, she will be acting against the last will of her husband. Littlefinger's lips twisted in a faint smirk. Ah, indeed. And if her cunning surpasses your determination, we may all be in for a show. Ser Barristan, who had been stoically silent, spoke up then. My lord, might I suggest a more private conference with the Queen? She is still the mother of the king. He caught himself. I mean of Joffrey, who everyone here believes to be King Robert's son. Her cooperation would go far in maintaining peace. Ned considered that. A private conference, yes. I will speak with her if she is willing. But I suspect I know her stance already. Still, I will try. Littlefinger placed his cup on the table with a small clink. I do wish you luck in that endeavor, Lord Stark. The Queen can be quite resolute. Ned turned his head, dismissing Littlefinger with a glance. I'll see you at the afternoon meeting. Baelish bowed with exaggerated politeness, then withdrew, leaving Ned and Ser Barristan alone. The old knight regarded Ned with thoughtful respect. You do well to be cautious, Ser Barristan said quietly. These halls are thick with secrets. Robert was a fool not to see it, may he rest easy. Ned nodded in agreement. He was a good man in many ways, but he let the realm slip through his fingers. Now we must pick up the pieces. He gripped the table's edge, letting out a weary sigh. Ser Barristan, you have served loyally for many years. If ever I need counsel, will you give it freely? The White Knight inclined his head. You have but to ask, my lord. My duty is to the realm. Ned placed a hand lightly on Barristan's shoulder. Thank you. He had deep respect for Selmy, a man who had served through multiple reigns, always with dignity. Perhaps he would be a key ally in the days ahead. After bidding the old knight farewell, Ned made his way out of the council chamber, intending to find Cersei. He navigated the winding corridors of the Red Keep, passing by richly furnished antechambers and tapestries woven with the histories of conquest. Twice, he halted as members of the court approached him, murmuring condolences for the king's death and inquiring about the new regency. Ned answered briefly, not wishing to reveal any more than necessary. Eventually, he reached the queen's apartments, where two Lannister guards stood at attention. They crossed their spears, preventing him from entering. Ned regarded them coolly. Inform the queen that Lord Stark, regent of the realm, requests an audience. The guards exchanged looks, uncertain. One of them knocked on the door. After a tense moment, the door opened, and a slender serving woman peered out. Yes, the guard relayed Ned's message, and the woman vanished inside. Ned waited, conscious of the tension building in his shoulders. He had no illusions that this conversation would go well, but at least if they spoke plainly, there might be some chance to avert the worst. At length, the serving woman returned, opening the door just wide enough. "Her Grace will see you," she announced. The guards withdrew their spears, and Ned stepped inside. Within, the Queen's solar was bathed in a warm glow from the morning sun streaming through tall windows. Plush cushions and gilded chairs decorated the space. Cersei sat by a table laden with fruit and bread that appeared untouched. Her face was pale but set in a mask of composure. Jaime Lannister was there as well, leaning against a pillar with one hand on his sword hilt. Ned realized he would have no private audience. Cersei preferred to keep her sworn shield close. He offered a polite bow. "Your Grace." Cersei inclined her head. "Lord Regent," she said, the title laced with subtle scorn. "I trust you have come with good news." Ned did not miss her tone. "I have come to pay my respects and ensure we are aligned in our duty to the realm. The King, Robert, named me protector until Joffrey comes of age. I wanted to speak with you regarding the best way to govern in the interim peacefully." She studied him with cool, green eyes, her hands resting in her lap. "Yes, your regency. I'm aware of the letter. I was there. But you must understand something. I will not be sidelined in my son's reign. If you think to wield power alone, you are mistaken." Jaime chuckled from his position by the pillar. Here, he muttered. Ned forced himself to keep calm. "I have no desire to rule without counsel, especially yours, your Grace. But Robert's will is clear, and I must uphold it." He took a step closer. "I only ask that we set aside hostilities for the good of the realm. The small folk do not deserve to suffer because of rivalries in court." Cersei's lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. "You truly believe you can separate court intrigue from governance, don't you? Such a Stark you are." She shook her head. "If we are to cooperate, you must not undermine my son's authority. Do not question his parentage. Do not threaten his claim." Ned's gaze flicked to Jaime, whose expression was carefully neutral. "I will not undermine him publicly," Ned said, each word chosen with care, "so long as he serves the realm faithfully. But if you take actions that threaten the peace, I will do what I must to protect the people. That is the role Robert charged me with." Jaime smirked. "You talk as though you have an army at your back, Stark." Ned's jaw tightened. "I have the weight of Robert's final command and the lords who still remember him fondly." He turned his attention fully to Cersei. "I am not blind, your Grace. I know the Lannisters are powerful, and I know that war is brewing if we cannot find common ground. But I will not be bullied." A moment's silence fell. Cersei's eyes blazed with a mixture of anger and calculation. She exhaled slowly, then spread her hands. "For Joffrey's sake and Tommen's and Myrcella's, I will not move openly against you yet. But rest assured, we will not kneel at your feet. Joffrey is king." Ned gave a small nod. "Let it be so until he reaches an age to rule," he repeated, refraining from stating the subtext. That Joffrey might not reach that day if the truth came out. "I appreciate your willingness to keep the peace. We shall work together for now." Cersei rose from her seat with a graceful motion, her gown sweeping across the floor. "Thank you for your visit, Lord Regent," she said pointedly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I wish to be with my children in this time of mourning." Ned inclined his head, recognizing the dismissal. "Of course, Your Grace." He turned to go, well aware that Jaime's gaze followed him like a hawk's. With measured strides, he made his way out of the solar. The door clicked shut behind him, and he heard the quiet murmur of voices resume inside. No doubt they were already plotting how best to maneuver him out of power. He returned to his own chambers, seeking a moment's solace. Inside, he found Arya practicing footwork with her wooden sword, dancing around the furniture while Sansa looked on in disapproval. "Father!" Arya exclaimed, stopping when she saw him. Ned gave a small smile at the sight of her, but he could not feign cheer. "Arya, Sansa," he said. "I thought I told you to remain in your rooms." Arya lowered her sword. "We got bored. Sansa was just sitting there, crying sometimes, so Sansa flushed. "I was not crying. I was just sad about the king's death," she said. But her eyes were puffy, and Arya's accusation was likely accurate. Ned sighed, ruffling Arya's hair. "It's all right, but in these times, I need you both to remain where you are safe. Do not wander about." He glanced at Sansa, seeing the mixture of fear and longing in her eyes. He knew she had once dreamed of being a queen to Joffrey. Now that dream must be turning sour. Sansa swallowed. "Father, is Joffrey king now?" Ned nodded. "He is recognized as king, yes, but that does not mean all will remain as it is." He knelt, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Listen to me, Sansa. I need you to be cautious. Be polite to him if you see him, but do not trust him blindly. Times are changing." Sansa blinked, tears threatening. "But he was always so charming before?" She trailed off, recalling the incident by the trident and all that had come after. "I will do as you say, father." She lowered her head. Ned pulled her into a light embrace, then beckoned Arya closer. He clasped both daughters' hands. "Stay strong for me. If anything happens, go to your mother or find your way to our guards. Do not try to fight battles on your own. Promise me." Arya scowled, seeming disappointed, but nodded. "I promise." Sansa murmured the same. Satisfied, Ned escorted them back to their chambers, ensuring the guards stationed nearby were loyal men from the north. Only then did he allow himself to return to the swirl of duties that awaited him. Over the next days, King's Landing wore a somber face. The king's body lay in state within the Great September of Baelor, draped in black cloth with the stag sigil embroidered in gold. People filed in to pay their respects, though many mourned more for the idea of King Robert than for the man he had become. Ned, as regent, stood vigil at certain hours, Ser Barristan by his side. Joffrey came once, wearing a stiff black tunic, and stared at his father's body with something akin to confusion. Cersei hovered near him, expression carved from marble. A subtle tension permeated every corner of the city. Whispers of war circulated like a fever. Some spoke of Lord Tywin Lannister amassing an army at Harrenhal, though it was not confirmed. Rumors claimed that Stannis Baratheon was gathering ships and men at Dragonstone. Ned received letters from the Vale, from Riverrun, from the north, all wondering what the future held. He answered cautiously, affirming that he served as regent until the rightful heir was recognized. One evening, as Ned studied a raven's message from Riverrun, Catelyn's homeland, he felt a stir of relief to read that she was safe, though anxious. She remained in the Riverlands to tend to certain obligations regarding her father's health. Robb Stark was in Winterfell, learning the ways of leadership under Maester Luwin's guidance. Ned longed to be with them, away from the poisonous airs of King's Landing, but duty held him in place. At last, the day came for Robert's funeral procession through the city. His body, sealed in a grand casket, would be carried on a black-draped carriage drawn by 4 ebony horses. The route was lined with the gold cloaks of the city watch. Cersei and Joffrey would follow in a royal litter, Ned among them on horseback as the regent. Thousands crowded the streets, casting flowers or weeping. Some cheered for King Robert, but many simply watched in uneasy silence, mindful of the changes swirling around them. The Lannister household stood in full regalia, and the knights of the Kingsguard rode behind the carriage. Ned led a small contingent of Stark men, their direwolf banners carefully furled so as not to provoke hostility from the Lannisters. Halfway through the city, Ned's gaze flickered to the crowds. He could sense the tension, the hush broken only by the thudding of hooves and the creak of wheels. Joffrey peered out from his litter, face set in a haughty expression, as though the adulation or mourning were all for him. Cersei sat beside him, wearing a black gown embroidered with golden lions. The people bowed as they passed, but there was little warmth in their faces. At the great September of Baelor, the body would rest for another night before final rites. Ned dismounted as they arrived. He caught the faint tang of incense and, steeling himself for the solemn ceremony, moved to help direct the pallbearers. Up the wide steps of the September, robed priests chanted prayers to the Seven. The carriage halted, and 6 strong men, including Ser Barristan, lifted the casket and bore it inside. Ned followed, aware that a throng of onlookers pressed closer, curious and restless. Within the echoing space of the September, candlelight glimmered on marble floors. King Robert's casket was placed on an elevated bier near the altar. High Septon approached, voice echoing with sonorous reverence as he blessed the departed king's soul. The hush was profound. Ned could see tears in Ser Barristan's eyes, and even Renly, standing near the front, looked stricken. Littlefinger and Varys watched from the sides, their faces masked in quiet observation. Jaime Lannister was absent, possibly preferring to remain outside. Joffrey stepped forward, performing a stiff bow before the altar, then turned to address the crowd gathered in the September. His voice rang out surprisingly strong. "My father was a great man, a great king," he declared. "We shall forever remember him as the one who freed us from the Mad King's tyranny." His words sounded rehearsed, an echo of something Cersei might have fed him. Ned held his tongue, letting the boy speak, though each sentence was a painful reminder of how twisted the truth had become. The ceremony continued, prayers chanted, rites performed. At last, the casket remained on the bier, wreathed in candles. The gathering dispersed slowly, but Ned lingered, saying a silent farewell to the friend he had once known. Only after the September was nearly empty did he step outside, the cool night air brushing his face. There, on the top step, he saw Arya, standing with a guarded expression, having somehow slipped away from her keepers. She held her wooden sword under her cloak. Ned approached quickly, concern flickering across his features. "Arya, why are you here?" She looked up at him, eyes bright. "I wanted to see. I heard the bells, saw everyone going. I hid in the crowd and followed." She hesitated. "I'm sorry, father. I just wanted to see." Ned felt a swell of conflicting emotions, but he could not bring himself to scold her in that moment. "You shouldn't roam alone. It's dangerous." He gently placed a hand on her shoulder and guided her away from the steps. "Come, let's return to the keep before anyone notices." They had gone only a few paces when a cry sounded from farther down the plaza, near a cluster of gold cloaks. Swords were drawn, and Ned instinctively pulled Arya behind him, heart pounding. But it appeared to be a minor scuffle, a drunken man screaming curses against the Lannisters who took our king. The gold cloaks quickly subdued him. Still, the moment underscored how tense the city was. Ned hurried Arya through the streets, flanked by 2 Stark guards who joined them, having finally spotted their charge. When they reached the Red Keep, he ushered Arya into her chamber with a stern warning. "Promise me, no more wandering alone, especially at night." She nodded, wide-eyed from the recent scare. "I promise." Ned left her in the capable hands of her septa, but he could not shake the uneasy feeling that violence lurked around every corner. As regent, he had slowed the Lannisters' grasp for power, but each day felt like walking on a razor's edge. War was not so far away. Renly might yet make a claim. Stannis might sail for King's Landing. Lord Tywin Lannister might march with his bannermen. And in the center of it all, the boy on the throne, Joffrey, who was not Robert's son, but had Robert's name and Robert's seat, at least for now. Late that night, Ned sat alone in his solar, a single candle casting dancing shadows on the walls. He stared at a piece of parchment, an unfinished letter to Stannis Baratheon. He had written and rewritten it multiple times, struggling with how to phrase his revelations about Joffrey's parentage. Each time he hesitated. Such a letter could incite a war that might consume thousands of lives. But perhaps the war was inevitable. Stannis deserved to know the truth. The realm deserved a rightful king. He gripped a quill, dipped it in ink, and set it to the parchment once again, writing in a clear, firm hand, "To Lord Stannis Baratheon, by the grace of the gods rightful heir to the Iron Throne." A knock came at the door, making him jump slightly. Quickly, he set the quill down and folded the parchment, placing it face down so the words could not be read at a glance. "Who is it?" he asked, his voice low. "It is Varys, my lord," came the soft reply from beyond the door. Ned rose, crossing the room to open it. Varys entered, wearing a voluminous robe and a concerned expression. He bowed slightly. "Lord Stark, forgive the late hour, but I bring news." Ned stepped aside, letting Varys pass. "Speak," he said, wary but curious. Varys folded his hands. "I have heard whispers among the gold cloaks that certain figures loyal to the Queen are plotting to remove you as regent. Perhaps not violently, but they may attempt to discredit you, arrest you, or confine you. I cannot say exactly when, but soon, I fear." Ned tensed. "And you have come to warn me?" Varys spread his hands. "I serve the realm, Lord Stark. An abrupt removal of the regent could plunge us into chaos." Ned regarded him for a long moment. "Why tell me this tonight?" The master of whisperers offered a gentle smile. "Because I believe you want what is best for the kingdom. You may not be the most cunning man in King's Landing, but your honor is refreshingly pure." He paused, letting that sink in. "Also, if the Queen seizes power too hastily, it will spark a war. I have no desire for war. War is bad for the realm, and for my little birds." Ned nodded slowly, crossing his arms. "So what do you suggest I do?" Varys tilted his head. "You might consider a demonstration of strength. Increase the Stark Guard, place loyal men in strategic posts within the Red Keep. Show the Queen that you will not be easily removed." He gave a mild shrug. "Or you might flee with your daughters and return north, leaving King's Landing to its own devices. But I doubt your honor would allow that." Ned's lips pressed into a thin line. "No, I cannot simply abandon my position as regent. Robert's final wish my duty." He trailed off, feeling the weight once more. "I will not run." Varys sighed softly, as though he had expected no less. "Then strengthen your position before they make their move. Secure the gold cloaks as best you can. Find allies among the lords in the city, and be watchful. If you are to remain regent, you must act decisively, my lord." Ned glanced at the folded parchment on the table, thinking of the letter to Stannis. Perhaps that, too, was part of acting decisively. "Thank you for the warning, Varys," he said quietly. "I will do as you suggest." He walked to the door, signaling that their meeting was done. Varys bowed once more and departed, leaving Ned alone with the flickering candlelight and the half-written letter. Slowly, Ned returned to the table, drew a steadying breath, and unfolded the parchment. He eyed the words he had written, hearing Varys's caution echo in his mind. War was coming, or so it seemed. If he was to remain regent, perhaps he needed the rightful king on his side sooner rather than later. Was that a contradiction in terms, inviting Stannis' wrath to overthrow the boy king he was sworn to protect? Or was it fulfilling his vow to Robert to protect the realm from false claimants? With a grin set to his jaw, Ned resumed writing. "It is my solemn duty to inform you of grave matters regarding the succession. The boy Joffrey is not of Baratheon blood, but..." The quill scratched on line after line. When he finished, Ned sealed the letter and stamped it with the direwolf of House Stark. He would dispatch it with the first raven at dawn. Then he sat back, exhaustion creeping through him, yet his mind abuzz with worry. He had chosen a path, one fraught with risk. Stannis might set sail on receiving this news, might move to claim the throne by force. The Lannisters would not stand idle. The Tyrells might see an opportunity, and who knew what alliances would form. But Ned Stark did what he believed was right, and that was all he could do. He blew out the candle and allowed the darkness of the night to envelop him. A storm was gathering over the Seven Kingdoms, and he could only pray that the realms survived the tumult to come. By midday, the Raven had departed for Dragonstone, carrying Ned's letter to Stannis. Ned redoubled his efforts to strengthen his position in King's Landing. He quietly replaced a few key guards in the Red Keep with men from his own retinue, men he trusted, however few they were. He met again with Renly, who renewed his plea that Ned abandon Stannis and support him instead. Ned refused, and Renly stalked away, muttering about dire consequences. Ned also tried to speak with Pycelle regarding the harvest reports and the city's grain stores, but the old maester seemed evasive, his watery eyes darting about as though measuring Ned's every word. That evening, Ned decided to do something he rarely did: walk the streets in secret. He needed to sense the city's pulse. With the help of two of his most trusted guards, he donned a plain cloak and left the Red Keep at dusk, mingling with the crowds near the Street of Steel. The blacksmiths hammered away at red-hot metal, the tang of smoke filling the air. Word of Robert's death and Joffrey's impending coronation had spread, but the people seemed subdued, watchful. Ned overheard muttered complaints. "We only just had a king, now another boy sits up there. The Lannisters will bleed us dry. The price of bread's rising again." There was no open rebellion yet, but the city's poor were suffering and dissatisfaction lay simmering beneath the surface. Farther on, near the mud gate, he observed a squad of gold cloaks roughly questioning a group of travelers who had come seeking work. One traveler insisted he was from the Stormlands, loyal to House Baratheon, but the guards scoffed, demanding bribes. Ned clenched his fists at the injustice, but he dared not intervene openly. Not yet. He memorized the guard's face instead, vowing to address such corruption. He returned to the Red Keep late, troubled by what he had seen. The city was a powder keg, and a single spark of conflict among the High Lords would ignite it. As regent, Ned felt the weight of preventing that spark, but every path seemed to lead to conflagration. In the following days, tensions only grew. Rumors exploded that Stannis was amassing ships, while the Lannisters quietly recalled various bannermen to Casterly Rock. Tywin Lannister had reportedly sacked a few small holdings near the Riverlands, an ominous sign. Ned felt the crown's authority slipping through his fingers, and he realized that if Stannis arrived, the Lannisters would not yield. The boy on the throne would be declared a usurper by the older brother of the late king, and all the Seven Kingdoms would be forced to choose a side. Cersei watched Ned's every move, though she pretended indifference. Joffrey ranted about wanting his coronation soon, wanting to parade through the streets as king. The day was set. He would be crowned at the Great September one fortnight hence. Ned dreaded that event, knowing it might become a flashpoint for violence. Then, one morning as Ned prepared to break his fast, a breathless messenger arrived in his chambers. "My lord, you must come to the courtyard at once. The queen has summoned the guard. She says she has orders from the king to—" The man's words stumbled. "It seems they mean to seize Lord Stark." Ned's heart jolted. He snatched up his sword belt and slung it around his waist, calling to his guards. "How many men do they have?" he demanded, even as he strode quickly from the room. The messenger struggled to keep up. "Dozens, my lord. The gold cloaks, they've assembled in the outer ward. Commander Slint is with them, as well as Ser Jaime Lannister." Cold fury ignited in Ned's chest. He had trusted Janos Slint's word, but it seemed the man had chosen his side. Varys's warning echoed. "If you are to remain regent, you must act decisively. Alert my household guard," Ned ordered the messenger. "Tell them to arm themselves and rally in the main courtyard. Go!" The man sprinted off. Ned rushed down the corridors, meeting a cluster of his men along the way. Some from Winterfell, some Sellswords he had hired for additional security. He realized with a pang that he could not muster more than 30 men at a moment's notice inside the keep. The Lannisters, aided by the gold cloaks, could easily outnumber them. He emerged into the courtyard. The midday sun shone down on a tense scene. Lines of gold cloaks stood in formation, spears upright. At their head was Commander Slint, stony-faced. Beside him stood Jaime Lannister, resplendent in gilded armor, his hand on the pommel of his sword. Beyond them he saw Cersei, flanked by a few Lannister guards. A hush fell as Ned approached, his men arrayed behind him. Cersei stepped forward, voice ringing out across the stones. "Lord Stark, you stand accused of conspiring against the king. Joffrey has decreed that you shall be taken into custody." A wave of shock rippled through Ned's men. He drew a slow breath, glancing at Slint, who avoided his eyes. "This is madness," Ned said. "I am regent by Robert's own command. You have no right to arrest me." Cersei's lips curled. "We have every right. Joffrey is king. The moment Robert died, the letter naming you regent became void. My son rules in his own right." Her gaze flicked over Ned's soldiers. "Surrender peacefully, and no harm will come to you or your daughters." Jaime grinned wolfishly, stepping forward. "It seems we have business to conclude, Lord Stark. Will you come quietly, or must we shed blood?" Ned's hand gripped the hilt of his sword. He willed himself to remain calm. If a battle erupted here, innocent blood would spill, and he might lose not only his own life but his daughter's too. Slowly, he scanned the lines of gold cloaks, seeing some who looked uneasy, but they had chosen their side. "This is treachery," Ned said quietly. Cersei raised her chin. "You would know of treachery, having schemed to keep my son from his throne." A taut silence reigned. Ned's men braced for a fight, their swords half-drawn. On the other side, the gold cloaks leveled their spears. Jaime let out a soft laugh, as though enjoying the tension. Cersei lifted a hand. "Last chance, Lord Stark." Ned glanced around. He thought of Arya and Sansa, likely in their chambers, oblivious to the danger. He realized that if he fought here, they would be the first to suffer. He had not set out to claim the throne for himself, only to fulfill Robert's last will and see justice done. But now justice teetered on a knife's edge, overshadowed by raw power. If he died here, who would protect his girls? Slowly, Ned let go of his sword hilt and raised his hands in surrender. A murmur of dismay arose among his men, but Ned shot them a warning glance. They needed to live another day to guard Arya and Sansa, to carry word to his allies. Ned's voice was grim. "I yield, for the sake of peace." Jaime's grin widened. He nodded to two gold cloaks, who came forward to bind Ned's wrists. Cersei's eyes gleamed with triumph. Behind Ned, he heard his men cursing in anger, but they stood down as the Lannisters threatened them with superior numbers. "Wise choice," Jaime said softly, leaning closer. "Sometimes you have to play the game differently if you want to stay alive." Ned said nothing, but his heart pounded with fury and dread. Cersei turned, addressing the gold cloaks. "Take him to the dungeons. Let him consider his actions there." She pivoted, cloak swishing, and made to leave, her retinue following. Ned's thoughts raced. In chains now, he was at their mercy. Would his letter to Stannis spark a war in time to save him? Would Renly make his move? Would the North rally? Or would they be too far away to help? And what of his daughters? He locked eyes with Jaime for one final moment before the gold cloaks led him away. The Kingslayer wore a smirk, but in his gaze flickered a hint of regret, amusement. Ned could not be certain. Then he was shoved forward, down the corridor that led to the black cells. With each step, the burden of Robert's final wish seemed to crush him further, and he wondered if all his efforts to protect the realm had only sped it toward the civil war he sought to avoid. The corridors twisted like a labyrinth, torchlit and cold. As they descended into the bowels of the Red Keep, Ned realized he might never see the sun again. The city above would learn soon enough that the Lannisters had seized the Regent, and chaos might break loose. Or perhaps the people would simply shrug, powerless against the might of House Lannister. Darkness pressed in, thick and suffocating, as the guards led him to a cell of rough stone. The door clanged shut behind him, echoing in his ears. He closed his eyes in the gloom, a single thought burning in his mind. He had tried to honor his friend, to keep the realm safe, yet all it had led to was this. The Game of Thrones was never fair, never kind, and Ned Stark was but another piece upon its board. Now he prayed that peace was not about to be sacrificed to the relentless ambition of the Lannisters. Outside, the realm stood on the brink of war. Above, in the Red Keep's halls, Cersei Lannister and her son prepared to claim power unopposed. Far away, ravens carried Ned's letters, messages that might ignite an even greater blaze. But within the cold darkness of the cell, Ned found himself alone, with only his conscience for company, still bound by the vow he had made to Robert Baratheon. A vow that now threatened to tear the Seven Kingdoms apart.